Good evening. I'm Penny McPhee, the president of the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation. Thank you for joining our final speaker series of 2011, and welcome to all of you who are on our webcast, participating in our live webcast. We encourage viewers, and even those of you who are here with us, to join the conversation on Twitter using hashtag American Dream. The Blank Family Foundation trustees created this speaker series to stir action on issues that will shape the quality of life for families in Atlanta and beyond. Tonight's program honors that challenge. We are confronting a question that binds us as a nation. What is the future of the American dream? There are many ways to think about access to the American dream. Given our foundation's commitment to education, we've chosen to look at it through that particular lens. Americans have always believed that hard work and education open the doors to success. Is the promise still alive for this generation of students? To take up this ambitious question, we have the right people in the room tonight. We've asked Pulitzer Prize-winning author David Garrow to lead the conversation with Debbie Bial and Bob Herbert. You'll be hearing more about these two amazing speakers in a few minutes. David is a research professor of history and law at the University of Pittsburgh. Many of you know David from his time in Atlanta on the Emory faculty. David is a prolific author, the author of more than 300 articles, essays, and books on civil rights, politics, and American history. You can see some of the additional titles on your program. I have a personal story to tell about David, one that he doesn't even know. In 1986, I collaborated with civil rights photographer Flip Schulke on a biography about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called King Remembered. That same year, another biography of Dr. King was also published. Just happened to be David Garrow's blockbuster, Bearing the Cross, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which won the Pulitzer that year in biography. So I'm not actually saying that but for David, our book would have won the Pulitzer Prize, but you gotta wonder. It really is an honor for me to meet this historian and author whom I've admired for so many years. David, I appreciate your willingness to help us understand this moment in American history. Of special importance to our topic tonight, we also have dozens of college students with us, each one embodying an unfolding American dream. Represented are Spelman, Morehouse, and Agnes Scott colleges, and Clark Atlanta, Georgia State, Georgia Tech, Oglethorpe, and Emory universities. Could all of the college students stand up and let us recognize you? We've been interviewing college students in recent weeks, hearing from them on their version of the future of the American dream, and you'll be able to view those videos at our website on Blank Foundation YouTube channel. We're pleased now to share a brief excerpt of the students' feedback, and after that, Arthur and Stephanie Blank will introduce our speakers. So let's have the video, please.
The future of the American dream.
American dream.
The future of the American dream.
The American dream.
For me, the American dream is
the future of the American dream is my generation.
It is my belief that the American dream is one in which race, gender, or sexual preference do not influence the success that one can achieve.
Will come with the recognition that each individual person has an insurmountable amount of worth to have equal opportunity to all types of higher learning education.
The pursuit of individuals' dreams as opposed to the pursuit of this one idea.
will include everyone having a stake in it and thus willing to fight for it.
We need to start with a strong educational background, and everyone has the same access to education across all borders.
I don't think the white picket fence, house, 3.5 kids is the typical American dream anymore.
Accepting and equality for all people, no matter the circumstance. It's one that is inclusive in terms of embracing people of different cultures, ethnicities, and various backgrounds.
I think it's kind of up in the air at this moment in time because the economy.
Now we really need to work harder for that dream.
For me, the American dream is looking at my mother who grew up in Compton, California, and my dad who grew up in rural Nigeria.
What I want for my son is the same as what my parents want for me, which is the ability to pursue my dreams.
It tends to embody both a charge and a challenge to accept or to promote the idea of democracy within the continental United States of America. American dream should focus on more than just America. We all should come together.
And I think that this new dream will arise out of political and social change.
The American dream is very much still alive and real, at least for me.
From my classmates that the American dream's pretty solid.
And as long as you work hard, I believe you can get there.
It's so hard to believe that we're pushing ourselves through 4 or 5 years of just all of this for what? And there's potential, and we'll see what happens.
Let me add my welcome to David and Bob and Debbie. We appreciate everybody being here tonight. I've got a whole bunch of scripted remarks here, and I'm going to kind of wing it a little bit here. But my wife and I are thrilled to be here tonight, and we're thrilled to spend time with this power couple. And usually the word power couple relates to folks that are involved in community, involved in making a difference, et cetera. And, very often from a business perspective, know all the right people, say all the right things, have the right points of connection, et cetera. The difference with Debbie and Bob is that they're a power couple because they make a difference in the world. And when you talk about power couple, to me, that's what power couple really is about. So this is the first time, believe it or not, that Debbie and Bob, although they both speak on a number of occasions separately, it's the first time they've actually been on the stage together, if you will, which was a shock to me when I first made the recommendation to Penny and Stephanie and I talked about it. It was a shock to me the two of them hadn't appeared together. So we're thrilled to have you both here, and it's an honor to have you both here. And I'll just make a couple of comments about Bob. And those of you that are devoted readers of the New York Times follow Bob's columns for some 18 years. And now that he's no longer writing for the Times, we certainly miss that. But Bob's focus has been the American dream. And, my comments, which I want to make kind of off script here, are not really compatible totally with what we saw here. I mean, I think you can define the American dream in a number of different ways, and I think these young folks and all of us in this room would define the American dream probably in a very similar way that they did tonight on the video. The problem is that the American dream is not in hand for lots and lots of people, and the gaps in America today are the greatest they've probably been in our history. Bob will speak to that with the stats and the data to back it up, et cetera. But one of the things I've learned being in business for many years, in any of the businesses I've been in over the years, is that I've been a very good listener. Been a good listener, and I've been a good responder to issues, et cetera. So what I want to do tonight is to really challenge Debbie, Bob, and David to not so much talk about the American dream, that we understand that, and they're welcome to do that, but really talk about solutions. Talk about really what are the issues that are causing these gaps to be as wide as they are today. What is it that is keeping us? What are the roadblocks? What are the red herrings? What are the barriers that are keeping us from fulfilling these dreams that the young people we saw tonight on video, the young people in this room tonight, the young people throughout the United States, really in all parts of the United States, are feeling and are experiencing today? Not just the last 3 or 4 years either. It goes back for a period of time. So we're honored to have Bob here tonight. He's written a couple of wonderful books. He's been a national correspondent for NBC. He's been on the Today Show on a regular basis. He's been on NBC Nightly News on a regular basis. He's received a number of awards. He does, really fabulous work. And one of the things, and I want him to speak about some of his experiences. I have a couple here, but they're much more meaningful coming from Bob, who's lived them, than it is from me to read them to you. But Bob not only has been a great listener in his life, but a great reporter on what he hears and on what he believes the solutions are. So tonight, we're here tonight to listen to these three folks who are experts in understanding the ground level realities of the challenges we're facing today, but to listen to their ideas on solutions and to work together as a group, all of us, in being open-minded to maybe some new answers today, some new solutions today. Clearly, everything we've been doing, while some parts of it have been working, in total it's not working, whether it's political, whether it's social, whether it's from a schooling standpoint, whatever it may be, we're challenged. And we haven't yet met those challenges, and the gaps are getting wider. So with that, I just want to say it's an honor, Bob, to have you here tonight. I'm looking forward to your comments. Obviously, I always enjoyed being with your wife as well. And David, it's always nice seeing you, and welcome back to Atlanta. So with that, let me introduce Stephanie, and she'll make a couple of comments.
Well, Debbie Bial has taken her own approach to opening up the American dream for more young people. Debbie created a nonprofit organization called the Posse Foundation to help more high school students gain access to some of the nation's top liberal arts colleges, but most importantly, to succeed once they arrived on those campuses. When a young man that Debbie knew dropped out of college, she asked him, well, what might have prevented this? And he said, I could have made it if I had my posse with me. And from that comment, Debbie thought of a simple but brilliant solution to the isolation that can make it so tough for any bright urban student to flourish in what is often a very foreign type of culture that they've never experienced before on that college campus. By teaming up groups of students, these are their posses, to support one another, she has transformed the college experience for thousands of students. And now these Posse scholars aren't just making it through college, they are succeeding in extraordinary ways, which I'm sure Debbie will share with you, and becoming leaders not only in their communities, but in the business world as well. I first met Debbie at a Council on Family Foundations event in New York. I heard her speak in a small but crowded room and had one of those moments where you literally feel like a light bulb is going off in your head, and it was like, wow, this makes such great sense. And I was so excited by what I heard her describe that I stalked her. I got the hotel to agree to give me her room number. I slipped a little fan letter under her door and said, I need to meet you. And she, thank goodness, didn't think I was crazy, and met me in New York. And I came back very excited about what I had learned from Debbie, shared it with both Arthur and Penny. And they too became excited about what Posse represented. So since 2004, we, as the Family Foundation, have invested nearly $15 million in various efforts to help more young people succeed in high school. And one of the bright spots in that has been our relationship with Posse. But it's not only been our relationship. We held an event here to introduce the Atlanta community to Posse as well. That helped them establish their roots here. They have their own Atlanta board. And most importantly, the philanthropic community as a whole has embraced Posse and the work that it does. It's not just about our foundation. It's about the whole entire community recognizing the brilliance of the work that you guys do. So we are so proud to be not only an investor in Posse, but a friend to Debbie. She's an extraordinary woman and is an inspiration to all of us. And if out of this evening, new possibilities, new partnerships occur because of what you hear, then tonight will have been a success. So thank you all for being here with us. Thank you.
I got two other things. I don't want Debbie to be overly flattered because it's not unusual for Stephanie to write notes and put them on the doors of people in hotels. So, no, I'm only kidding. She doesn't normally do that, no. But the other thing which I will share with you, which Stephanie, I thought she might, she had asked me some years ago, probably about 7 years ago, and Debbie and Stephanie came to a National Football League meeting with our owners, and I asked the commissioner at that time, I said, well, can I arrange for some time for these two women to speak to the owners about Posse? And I will tell you that, you know, owners, 31 other guys, gals like me, and sometimes they don't always listen and they're involved in their own stuff, et cetera, but these two women got up there and gave a pitch from an understanding of what Posse is about and the impact it was having on lives. And I still get some comments, you know, now and again from other owners about that presentation and about the work that Posse is doing. So they had a very lasting impact on a number of folks. And I believe Posse, as a result, has had some success in a variety of cities around the National Football League as well. But these two gals did a great job then. So thank you.
We're on. Well, thank you all for being here. So let's pick up on Arthur's challenge, Bob. If we start out with this very elastic phrase, the American dream, is it about opportunity in the most broad, inclusive sense? Is it about economic betterment? Is it about education? Is it about home ownership? Is it about expecting that your children's and grandchildren's lives will be measurably better than your own? Where would you start?
It's obviously about all of those things, but if there was one point that I think is more important than all others, it has to do with employment. Given the kind of society that we've established, if you want to argue that, you know, we should have some other kind of society, that's for a different program, but in the one that we have, you have to have a job in order to make it. And you can't realize your dreams and your aspirations if you don't have a job that makes enough for you to support yourself and to support your families. And that's where the real rot in the American dream is right now. It's the rot in the employment market in the United States. And I'll give you a good example. Before I go any farther though, I just want to say thank you so much to Arthur and to Stephanie and to Penny for putting this wonderful evening together. I'm always paranoid when you do these programs, I guess nobody's going to show up. You're up here looking out at an empty room with you. This is like just a fine audience. So it's a great pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be here with David.
And me. It's when it's the wife, you know.
I am with her all the time. That's like a perpetual honor, trust me. So, but I'll tell you just a little bit about my life coming up, because I am the embodiment of the American dream. I mean, I have had a hell of a run, and I couldn't have had that run anyplace else, especially since I started off like really shaky. I was a good student in high school. Everybody saw me as like a really smart kid. And I was so smart that, you know, when I got a scholarship to college, I hid it. So how smart was that? I put it in the drawer and never told my parents about it, because I had a Thunderbird in high school. My parents were upholsterers. My father was an upholsterer. My mother was a seamstress. So they had a couple of stores in suburban New Jersey. My grandfather was an upholsterer. I knew how to upholster, so I could make money in my father's store and my grandfather's shop. So I had my car, I had discovered girls, I had discovered rock and roll, and college was not going to be for me. So what happens, I grew up in the 1950s and 60s, so this was in the mid-1960s. And what did I think was going to happen? I got drafted into the Army at the time when they were sending everybody to Vietnam. So luckily for me, I didn't go to Vietnam. I got sent to Korea. A lot of my friends went to Vietnam. Tragic stories in many cases. So that did wake me up. I got a little smarter after 2 years in the Army, and I figured that I ought to get my act together. So I was going back to college. I had done some college while I was in the Army. I was going to go for my degree, knew that I wanted to be a writer. There were two big newspapers in New Jersey in those days, the Newark Star-Ledger and the Newark Evening News. And I called up the Star-Ledger to ask for some advice on what I should major in college if I wanted to be a writer. I just wanted a little guidance. And they hired me as a reporter. And that's how easy it was to get a good job in those days. I'm not kidding you. I did go on and eventually got a degree in journalism from the State University in New York. I went to Montclair State College for a while. It was easily accessible. There was no problem gaining access to decent colleges. Not only did I have access, but it was cheap. Forget about a college loan. Because I was a GI, my tuition was paid, and I got a monthly stipend. They paid me to go to college. So they paid me to go to college, and I had a job. And here's the part that's all part of the American dream, but you do have to work hard. I mean, it's not just enough to show up at a newspaper. So I worked really hard. I learned my craft. I put in long hours. I got promoted. Eventually, I went to the Daily News in New York and to NBC and to the New York Times. The point of this story is that you cannot do it that way anymore. Jobs are not as readily accessible as they were in those days. Kids come out of college now much more prepared to be writers or journalists or lawyers or whatever than I was when I went to work at the Star-Ledger in Newark, New Jersey. So they're prepared for these jobs, but the jobs aren't available. And in many cases, when they do get jobs available, they're not the kind of jobs that have health care, that will eventually have retirement benefits, that will give you a paid vacation, for example. I had all of those things. I had all of those things with every job that I ever had. And so I think that employment, ready employment, is the cornerstone of the American dream. Now, you have to work hard if you can get that job. But I think that as a society, if we're not going to betray today's young generation and the generations that are coming forward, we have to have a serious national conversation about what we're going to do to provide enough work for all those Americans who want and desperately need to work.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing to that, which is that Bob's going to drive home this point of jobs, 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 which is so critical. And you're going to hear me throughout the next hour driving home this point of education. But the point I wanted to make is that 20 years later, when I was a kid, we're 20 years apart, the American dream...
So I've been lucky my entire life.
The American dream was still just as accessible. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we want to kind of paint a picture of is that is now not the case anymore. It really has changed. I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey. My dad played for the New York Philharmonic for 38 years. He was a musician. He didn't make a lot of money, but he made a decent salary. We were kind of firmly middle class. My mom stayed home and raised us. But they saved their money from the moment I was born so that I could go to whatever college I wanted to. I remember them saying, we want you to be able to go to any college you want to. And they were able, by kind of scraping together all of their money, to pay for me to go to Brandeis University, which today, I might be getting the number a little bit wrong, is $50,000 a year now. Now, my same family today could not do that. That could not happen. So when I was growing up too, there was still that sense that even a middle-class family could dream the dream and make it happen for themselves. And So I'm going to bring education into this a little bit.
I would just add that Deb went to Brandeis, graduated from Brandeis, and then went to Harvard, got her master's at Harvard, and then got her doctorate in education at Harvard. So she really, you know, did the route, went to all these
that was relentless.
first-rate schools, but it was, as she pointed out, it was doable.
It was doable.
Deb, in the America before 1980, when America still had manufacturing industries, whether steel or rubber or brass, you know, and lots of people could get stable jobs, whether it's a steel worker, upholstery, musician, and you had that sort of stable, reliable employment available, even to people who had graduated high school and no more, if that. But if the change in the American economy this last generation and a half has made access to higher education more important now than it was when Bob was a young man, is the pricing of American higher education such that it's really throwing a boomerang at young people where if they do obtain access, they're going to be graduating with a loan burden that, especially in the current job market, could lead people to rationally wonder, what's the trade-off here? Is it worth incurring this sort of debt for an uncertain future?
It's a great question. It's the #1 question in higher education today, is the sustainability of the economic model. Currently today, Americans have over $600 billion in debt from loans that they've taken to pay for their college experience, and I mean, that's insane, right? We're thinking of it as a bubble right now, and a college today that costs $40,000 or $50,000 in the next 9 years is going to cost $90,000 a year. Any parents in the room worrying a little bit?
Fainted.
Yeah, a few fainting over there. So it's a great question, and it's one that our institutions of higher education are thinking about. We've got a huge crisis, huge crisis, because you're looking at a college education as more important than it's ever been, ever before. It's your ticket to a job, and the more education you have, the more money you will make in the workforce. And yet, when you look at who's getting access to higher education, you start to worry, right? Our Stephanie and Arthur, especially Stephanie, have spent so much time looking at K through 12 education and preschool even, and thinking about, well, what's happening with our kids? We're failing them. We're failing our young people all over the United States. There's incredible inequities in our public schools. And when you start to break it down by race and by class, you see that the problems that we're creating because of our failing public schools are going to perpetuate this class system that we have in the United States, that Arthur was talking about. The gap is widening. We're losing our middle class. So yes, we should talk about that. Your ticket to a job is your education, but who has access to the best institutions of higher education? It's scary when you look at it. If you look at the top 150 colleges and universities in the United States, the top 150 schools, 74% of their student body come from the top economic quartile. 74%.
Can I just add here, because if Deb's talking about education and I was talking about employment, and you put these two crucial components together, if you're talking about the American dream, but almost however one defines the American dream, it almost always has to do with, even though we don't like to talk about class so much in this society, it almost always has to do with the middle class. I mean, the American dream is almost always a dream about a middle class standard of living. And if you have a middle class family and you know, the parents are looking at the young people, they want those young people to have advantages that the parents didn't, and maybe a better quality of life, or maybe a richer educational or professional experience, but it's almost always a middle-class existence that we're talking about. Now, for the fortunate ones who become wealthy, some very rich, I mean, that's a wonderful thing, but that's not usually what people are talking about when they're talking about the American dream. They're talking about the middle class. And what's happening to the middle class now? It's shrinking. I mean, the middle class is, we knew that it was being squeezed for a long time, but now the data is coming in that proves it. And there were a couple of recent stories. One had to do with the number of people who are living in middle-class neighborhoods in the United States, and it's fewer and fewer. There are more people who are living in very wealthy enclaves in the United States than some years or some decades ago. But that's not where the bulk of those folks from the middle class have gone to. Some have been fortunate enough to go in that direction. What's happening is you're having more and more people living in neighborhoods that were poor or that were near poor, not very far above the poverty line, and that means that the middle class is shrinking. Then the Census Bureau has come out with some other figures recently that show that in addition to the ranks of the poor growing, which we already knew was the case, a tremendous number of poor people in the United States, I think a shameful number. But what we're finding out is that there are more and more people in a category that they call the near poor. And these are folks who are just a notch or two above the official poverty line. The official poverty line is something like 20.
Yeah, 24.
It's about 23 or 24. What? About 23,000 plus for a family of four. So imagine trying to make it with a family of four on $23,000 a year. But there's also a large number of people, and I think that the number that sticks in my mind is 17 million, but I'd have to check it, who are living in extreme poverty in this country. And those are people who are living on $11,000 or less for a family of four over the course of a year. Well, that just boggles my mind. I don't even know how that's at all possible. When you add up all the numbers, according to the Census Bureau, the people who are living in poverty officially, the people who are a notch or two up to 150% of the official poverty line, you add those folks together and you get nearly 1/3 of the entire population of the United States. And the outlook is grim. I mean, we're stuck in a terrible employment environment. And as Deb has just explained, it's an environment in which a college education is more and more important, but access to college is getting more and more constrained. So we're in trouble as far as the American dream is concerned. And eventually we'll talk about some potential solutions here tonight.
Now, traditionally, in a lot of what has been said about the American dream in decades past, home ownership, and several of the young people in the video touched on this, home ownership was assumed to be a sort of quintessential part of that. Is that incorrect? Is it less significant now than it used to be? We think about the sort of foreclosure epidemic that we've seen in so many parts of this country the last few years. I mean, that to me, maybe even in a more profound way than losing a job, is a sort of stake in the heart.
I agree. Well, the folks, and there are so many of them now who are struggling with foreclosure issues. I mean, these are folks who actually thought they had a pretty good foothold on the American dream, and now that's just being completely undermined. But home ownership was always, I thought it was important in two ways. One was symbolic. I mean, the idea that you actually owned your own home, but people, they used to really own their own homes. I mean, you know, they had equity in these homes. Now, you know, it got to the point where, you know, if you slapped a down payment on and you had a big mortgage, I mean, you said that you were a homeowner, but really the bank owned that home. When I was growing up, home ownership was a big deal, but people would very patiently pay that mortgage month after month, and that's how the middle class would establish their wealth. So the wealth for most middle class families came from the equity in their homes, and that equity was very often passed on to the next generation and built upon, so that over a period of a few generations you could put together some real wealth there. That's much less the case there. So the building of wealth was always very important, but I think that symbolically a home meant a lot to people now. That has gone haywire along with a lot of other things. And now I think that the concept of actually owning your own home is less important now. I think we're getting a greater sense of what home ownership really means. If you have, all these folks who have homes that are underwater, they're not building any wealth. Some are walking away from it. A lot of people are deciding that it's makes more sense to rent now than to actually buy a piece of property. But I think that home ownership is less important, frankly, than employment. And employment, I think, is the real issue that we don't have a handle on it. That's true. We don't know what we're going to do about employment. But I think that we are not even seriously engaging this issue. We are not having the kind of national conversation in this country, and a great deal of that conversation should be going on in the academy, because there's an awful lot of expertise there where we should hear more from. But we're not having the kind of serious conversation about what the employment landscape in the United States is going to be like over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I think that that's a more important issue than the home ownership issue.
One of the young people in the video almost directly echoed a phrase of Dr. King's, and King's phrase would be to talk about the worth of each human personality. And when King on Independence Day 1965 gave a sermon entitled The American Dream here at Ebenezer, and he talked about what he called the amazing universalism of the dream. But rather than focus on schooling or employment or housing, his rhetorical emphasis was on the line from the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think it at least potentially challenges us, especially if we do this in an international comparative context and look at the U.S. in comparison to other societies. Are we being too narrow if we talk only about economic success and economic stability? Do we focus too little on political freedom, political liberty, that people aren't going to get thrown in jail or prosecuted if they criticize the government in a blog post, or some student criticizes the governor of their state in some Twitter message, as we've read about this past week. And religious liberty and religious freedom, that there's no pressure, on you from the state structure to believe one particular thing. So is there a completely non-economic aspect that America should be inherently proud of?
Well, I would kick this to Deb in a little bit of a different context, because it seems to me that the things that you're talking about here, whether you're talking about political liberty, civil liberties, some of the great freedoms that we have in the United States, which are so important, but it seems to me that that's in the context in which Americans are allowed to live richer lives. And that's where I would go to the education component. I would agree with you that there can be an overemphasis on matters economic, but I would ask Deb about the role of education, especially higher education, in preparing youngsters for richer lives, whether they make a lot of money during the course of their lifetime or not.
We were talking about this, probably the past week we've been talking about this. The idea that everyone has a dream, right? Like, you know, if I said raise your hand, if when you were a little kid you dreamt one day you're going to be fill in the blank. You all have dreams. And if you ask kids today, do you have a dream? They all have dreams. And they all believe that they can achieve those dreams. The funniest, I shouldn't say it's funny, but we did a survey of our Posse alumni. Almost 1,000 students filled the survey out. And something like 90% of them said they believe that one day they will have their dream job. How great is that? How wonderful, right? But only 19% of them thought the American dream was alive and well. You know, it's a conflict that we have going on inside ourselves, right? We all believe in the dream. We all believe that, you know, what Martin Luther King talked about, the Declaration of Independence says, and what this country is about. We believe in it. But if you asked us if the vehicle is there today for us to achieve our dream, can we get to it? We're getting a little nervous about that. We really are. And we talk about the American dream as it relates to the individual, right? Beverly Tatum becomes president of a university. Wow, you know? That's the dream. But there is the dream for the country, that we are truly a meritocracy, that this nation really does allow people to work hard, and if they work hard, they can achieve their dreams. They can, but are we really a meritocracy? I mean, that's a question that, you know, the answer's shaky, right? We're not really a meritocracy anymore. And it's very upsetting, and we can't let that slip away. We have to fight for this country to retain that image so that we can be as close to a real meritocracy as possible. And a lot of what's happened in the country today has fought against that concept, has gone against all of that.
Now is this, you know, to play devil's advocate here, is this whole concept of the American dream really bottomed on false optimism? It's you know, and you almost put it in this formulation. It's a sort of if-then proposition. If people really work hard, then they should succeed. You know, there's an expectation of success. You know, but to quote, you know, the other most famous Georgian of the 20th century, President Carter, life isn't fair. And you know, the notion that life isn't fair seems to undercut the way we all endorse this slogan.
My view is that life is not fair, but it has been fairer in my experience in the United States than in other places. But we're losing a lot of that fairness. Yeah. And to go back to the original points of your question, we're beginning to see the erosion of some of our freedoms. We're beginning to see the erosion of some of our liberties in the United States. We're beginning to live the Big Brother aspects that were fictional when 1984 came out. We're losing our moral standing in the world with these wars that become indefensible. For example, Iraq, I thought was indefensible from Jump Street. I supported the invasion of Afghanistan, but that went haywire as well. There's no reason for us to be in Afghanistan more than a decade after the September 11th attacks. But we have black site prisons all over the country where, in fact, people are held without any fair opportunity to challenge the people who have made accusations against them, without the opportunity to mount a defense. How can the United States justify having people in prison who are not allowed to present a defense of the charges against them and have these prisons in secret? I did many stories when I was at the New York Times, many columns about the extraordinary rendition where the United States would, in fact, kidnap people and turn them over. They were alleged to be terrorists. In many cases, they weren't. In some cases, they were completely innocent. The United States would kidnap people and turn them over to other countries where torture was commonplace, and they would be, put in the equivalent of dungeons and tortured and that sort of thing. Extraordinary rendition is still legal in the United States. We don't have any documentation that the Obama administration is rendering people, but it is certainly legal, and they reserve the right to render people in this country. So these tremendous strengths of the United States, even if I'm not looking at life through rose-colored glasses. I know that there was McCarthyism. I know that there were the great struggles that blacks and that women had to put up with, and the great fight of the labor unions over many decades, and the struggle to get rights for gays in this country. But this was a country in which you could put, and I think Deborah's going to talk a little bit about movements, but this was a country in which you could put movements together to fight for the rights that were guaranteed under the Constitution in this country. We're getting very close to the idea that those rights that we held sacred for so long are in fact shrinking.
Now, Deb, a week plus ago, President Obama got himself potentially, arguably, in a little bit of trouble by using the word lazy. Now, is it necessary for young people like the ones that your foundation helps? Is it necessary for people to believe in the American dream, to believe in the expectation of betterment and advancement, in order for them to work their hardest?
I mean, I think so. I think we need this dream. Why would we ever want to get rid of it? Why do we want to lose it, right? And I don't think people are lazy. People work really, really hard in this country. And I see hundreds of families. We had 14,000 students nominated across the country for our partners' scholarships this year. 14,000 students. We had 560 slots available for them. We turned away thousands of kids. We just opened in New Orleans, and somebody told me that one student who was nominated walked from one side of the city all the way to the other side just to drop his application off at our office because he couldn't get there. There was no transportation for him or whatever. They are working really hard, and their families are working really hard, and I think a lot of the people who are unemployed would rather not be getting welfare. They want jobs. They want to be employed. I know that we're going to switch to talk a little bit about some of the programs that used to be in place. You're going to talk a little bit about the New Deal. And can I just inject this one moment in time that if we could just remember it in the back of our minds, it could give us some hope today. College-going rates in the United States are different for blacks, Latinos, and whites and Asians, right? Blacks and Latinos are going to college at lower rates than whites and Asians. And if you look at the 1970 to the current day, that hasn't really changed. It's getting a little bit better. That's good. But it hasn't really changed, except for one point in time. From 1970 basically to now. Do you know when that was? Could you guess? When blacks, Latinos, and whites were all going to college at the same rate. Someone said late 1970s. Why? There was the GI Bill, right? The Pell Grants were implemented. Affirmative action was in place. And guess what had kicked in? The civil rights movement had really made a difference. And for the first time in the country, oh my God, it was doable. It wasn't rocket science. College was affordable. People had more access. There was more opportunity. We were fighting for what we believed in. And then what happened after that? Backlash to affirmative action, just what Bob was saying. We've been chipping away at these rights and things that I think that people of this country deserve. And little by little, guess what happened again? We started separating those college-going rates, and blacks and Latinos started going to college at lower rates than whites and Asians again.
And the implications demographically, what's coming?
So, fastest growing population in the United States is the Latino population, right? And if we don't do something about this, I mean, obviously we're perpetuating a class system, but in a way, if you look at race and how race plays into that class system, that's not a good thing. If you look at the US senators, right, United States senators, today in 2011, 96% of US senators are white. Only 17% are women. Come on, you know, come on. And we can do something about it. And
what happened to black representation in the Senate when Barack Obama left? Excuse me.
Right. We went from 1, unless you count.
Now, one last sort of hard question for both of you before we
do we
open it up to
transfer
the open it up to the floor and particularly let some of the young people put questions to you. When not to defend whatever algorithms Google may use, but when you look around on the web for the American dream, you realize within about the first 90 seconds that an awful lot of what's out there is sarcastic, dismissive, critical. You know, if you look for sort of top 10 quotes about the American dream, way up there is one from the late comedian George Carlin saying it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. And you know, hoping maybe that our young people in the room here tonight, don't take that perspective on it. But there's an undertow here of whether folks like the three of us may be, articulating a doctrine of greater optimism than the realities of American life may deserve.
I mean, I don't think so. I think, I don't just look at my life. I used my life as an example. But I look at all the people in my family and my friends and the people I knew who came out of that post-war generation, and they lived amazing lives. There were all kinds of problems, but if you talk to people who had participated in the civil rights movement, for example, I mean, the richness of that experience and what they ultimately achieved. No one would want to go back to the way women were treated in the 50s and 60s when I was a youngster. But when you look at what the women's movement has achieved, there were all the folks who would not tolerate the abuses in those years and said that we have to get together and we're building a movement and we're going to change this country. Well, they did change this country. And then Deb was talking about some of the supports for the American dream that used to be there when in the depths of the Depression, which was far worse than anything that we're experiencing now, you had the Works Progress Administration as part of FDR's New Deal. And while that did not break the back of the Depression, it sure put a heck of a lot of people to work at a time when a lot of families just didn't even have enough money to put food on the table. And one of the reasons that Roosevelt was so popular, even though the Depression did not end during the decade of the 1930s, was the fact that so many families benefited from the programs of the New Deal, and they felt that the president was looking out for them. But I also, I had mentioned the GI Bill in the post-World War II era. There was you were talking about home ownership, the federal guarantees for home mortgages in a context that made economic sense was so helpful. I'm very big on the need to rebuild America's infrastructure because that's a way to create jobs. But you had all the infrastructure building in the post-World War period, not just the roads of the interstate highway system that Eisenhower gets so much credit for, but also the school systems that were built in the 1950s and 60s, and all the suburban municipalities that were developed during that period, all the scientific research and development that was done. We need to be doing all of that stuff in a 21st century context, not trying to go back to the way things were, but update and learn the lessons of that era and put it to work for us now. And I just think that right now we're not doing that. I'm not sure, what's the right button to push to get people motivated on a vast scale, or to get leadership motivated on a vast scale to get this stuff started. I'm looking for it. I'm out there in the hunt. Maybe before I get this book finished, I'll have a few more answers. Okay.
Now, Debbie, before we ask people to line up here to put questions to both you and Bob, from your perspective, in Dr. King's phrase, where do we go from here? What are your
You have to keep
three?
referencing Dr. King. It's really hard.
Well, we're in Atlanta.
I know. I think we need two things. We need movements to continue. We need the people to come together and to speak out. Bob, what was the phrase that you used the other day that I liked so much? That it came from the heart. What'd you say about
that real change, transformational change, will have to come from the bottom up. Howard Zinn said that, the historian. I had lunch with him just a few weeks before he died, actually, back in 2009. But he said real change will have to come from the people. It always comes from the bottom up.
So, and it comes from the heart. So for those people that have been criticizing the Occupy Wall Street, Occupy fill in the blank across the country, across the world, it was a movement that was coming from the heart, right? People were expressing dissatisfaction or their pain. And whether or not there were specific demands that emerged, we heard the people, right? We heard them loud and clear. It was right outside my office at 14 Wall Street. I heard them every day. I had to walk through them. I had to push through them. We had barricades. I couldn't even get to the place to buy lunch. And I was happy because I felt like this country was expressing itself. And if we can't get it done through the political system that we have right now, and it looks like we're not getting it done, right? It's just not working. And until it works, we need to speak out. So our communities need to come together, and they need to continue to speak out. And even though the park was cleared down on Wall Street, that park was cleared. What was the headline we saw? That the lexicon has changed. And we now know what the 99% means. That's in the lexicon. That's great. That's a start. And David and we were talking earlier on, movements don't start in the most organized fashion. They're not all tidy and have agendas and little things that have to get checked off. They just emerge, and we want that to continue. And then the second thing that we need, and Posse's about this, and I think, Arthur Blank is a perfect example of this. About a guy, you weren't wealthy growing up, and you became unbelievably successful. I mean, there's an American dream story kind of, very, very, you can hear about his story, you can read about his story. We need more leaders who come from the people, right? We need leaders who represent the changing demographics of the nation, and we need them to come from our churches and our synagogues and our mosques. We need them to come from our community organizations. We need them to come from our schools, our colleges, our campuses. We need them to be strong and be brave, like Andrew Goodman, right, who was killed fighting for civil rights, trying to get people to vote. We need young people, and we need people from the community to take a stand, to shout, to be loud, to write blogs, to be out there so that we can hear viewpoints that aren't expressed through our traditional channels.
Demand that those doors of opportunity be forced open again. We have a generation of young people I know they're smarter than I was when I was 17 and 18 years old. They're not hiding their, you know, they're not hiding their scholarships in the bureau drawer. But that's the generation that we're going to get the additional Arthur and Stephanie Blanks from. I mean, you know, but you can't do it if you stifle their opportunities. You have to give these young people an opportunity to thrive, and they will thrive if you open the door. I actually think all you got to do is open that door a little bit of a crack, because there's a lot of energy out there, man. I would say stand back if you open that door a crack, because that stampede will come at you and get you. So I don't move as fast as I did when I was hiding those scholarships.
You're pretty good.
Now, let me go ahead and encourage people to go to either of the microphones that are here, and to say especially that the college students in the room should not be shy. Don't let the folks who are your parents' age, you know, monopolize it all.
Act like you're in the New York Press Corps.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Yolanda Watson-Spiva. I'm the Executive Director of Project Grad Atlanta. And I wanted to make a point because I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that the American dream initially was about access to opportunity and some modicum of wealth. And there has been a long-standing opposition. It's been very proprietary. Initially, it was proprietary to white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and the goal was to exclude other. And so as other began to encroach more and more upon the American dream in terms of admission to colleges, in terms of gaining access to wealth through employment opportunities, it seems like that goal to keep the American dream for a certain segment of society, unfortunately, you would think that would have waned by now, but it continues to grow. And once we've seen an African-American president, for example, that broke through the American dream sound barrier that no one could have ever expected. And so the vitriol in response to that has really made a certain segment of our society more determined to make that American dream something that is only for some and not a dream for all. And so when we talk about the American dream, it's very interesting because I think that we may have a shared sort of general expectation for that, but there still is opposition. So when you're talking about access, we really have to rage against the machine to make sure that that access is for all and not proprietary. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with her.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was good.
And I would suggest, because I think there are those forces in the society, to the extent that the American dream is still out there, that they would like to preserve it for just a few. My response is very similar to what you're saying. Just folks need to fight back. You know, that's where the civil rights movement came from. The people who sat in at those lunch counters, they didn't have any more of a long-term agenda than the Occupy Wall Street crowd did, but they were fighting for access to the American dream for everybody. And the civil rights movement was not a fight just for black people. I mean, the immediate goals were to secure the rights of African Americans, but try to imagine what this country would be like now in total if the civil rights movement had not happened, or if the women's movement had not happened.
Sir?
Hi, Emery Morseberger. Thank you all for being here. Two thoughts and a question. First of all, we need to reduce the cost of higher education. It's now being run for the benefit of the institutions. Second, we need to go back and begin making things here. More people work in the hospitality industry than work in manufacturing in the United States. That's where our jobs need to come from. Third, I was one of the people you heard shouting up there on Wall Street 3 weeks ago. And my question is, how can that movement, which is growing, it is painted by Fox News as a bunch of flakes, but it includes a tremendous variety of very motivated people of all kinds. How can that movement be focused to accomplish what the movements in the 60s accomplished?
Yeah. We both have views about that. I mean, I think leaders need to emerge. You know, this kind of gathering can only get us so far, right? We need to have leaders emerge, or we need to identify leaders who can represent, and we need to identify issues that we want to address. I think we both feel that.
And also, you know, I did a program with The Nation magazine a couple of weeks ago, and I referred to the Occupy protests as a cry of the heart that has tapped into a great deal of the distress that's out there among ordinary people all across this country. But I do think that it's a mistake to look to the occupiers for the solutions, for a roadmap to, you know, resolve these problems. They have put this issue out there. They have drawn national attention to some of the greatest inequities in our society, the inequalities in wealth and income, the unfairness that has gone on with the bank bailouts and the way they were crafted, and so many other things that we know that they were talking about. But it's up to other people to build on that momentum. The leaders that Deb is referring to, those leaders can come from anywhere. Those leaders can come from young people or older people who are in this room right now. Just build on those momentum. If you want a roadmap or a specific agenda to address some of the problems in this society, draw that up right now and you know, and strike. So what I'd like to see are progressive leaders in the United States, just a group of them get together and have a brainstorming session and say, how can we build on the momentum that the occupiers have established here? I'm a little concerned because I don't see that happening right now, but I'd love to see it happen.
Thank you.
Ma'am?
Hey there, I'm Lee Halseman. I'm a producer of children's entertainment, and I'm fighting tooth and nail to make quality and interesting programming for kids. And as I'm doing this, I come across a lot of, oh, that's great, but we can't sell advertisers for that. And I'm interested in your opinion on the role of media and entertainment in building and shaping our leaders of tomorrow, and perhaps influencing our opinions of the American dream, whether we're building it up or tearing it down, and what our kids are exposed to.
Oh, come on, you're the expert.
I think that media in this country have done just a terrible job. I think we do a terrible job covering what goes on in the country. I think we do a terrible job covering politics. If I hear any more about Herman Cain, I'm going to scream. You know, and we don't have a great deal of quality entertainment, whether it's for young people or children or teenagers or even adults for that matter. I don't know when I became the old codger who say, oh, back in my day it was always like so much better. You know, but it's funny. I used to hear people talking about what a cultural wasteland the United States was back in the 1950s. And I have argued against it ever since then. The 1950s, this cultural wasteland, the era of McCarthy, et cetera. We've already talked about the civil rights movement coming out of there. But we had probably the peak of the Broadway musical theater in the 1950s. We had rhythm and blues putting out music that was just fantastic. We had fiction writers who were second to none in the world. In the 40s and 50s, the United States became the art capital. New York actually became the art capital of the world, taking it back from Paris, especially with abstract expressionism. We had the jazz probably coming to its peak in the 1950s, or certainly no later than the 1960s. We had the creation of rock and roll. I mean, it was like an unbelievable phenomenon. We had folk music. The United States, we had serious drama on Broadway. I saw Arthur Miller being interviewed on television. This was, really goes back a long time, but Arthur Miller was saying that he could not get a play produced on Broadway. Arthur Miller. So I completely agree with you, and that too becomes another issue that has to be a conversation in which serious people decide to brainstorm and decide how can we rebuild the cultural aspects of the United States, right along with the academic and right along with the economic and right along with the educational
And I just want to add,
aspects.
it feels like you can't fight for it because the dollar rules, but you can. And little by little, your integrity is more important than anything else. You keep fighting for it. You be that annoying bug in the ears of the producers or whoever it is that is saying no, or and if Arthur was your boss, he might say, let's take a chance on this program that might not make any money. We won't get any commercial supporters. Right? Wouldn't you, Arthur?
I'll give you my card, Arthur.
But if one program gets produced that way, it's worth it. I mean, you have to just keep fighting for it. I know it seems like that's not a big answer. I feel like it's a big answer because we're not doing that. We're resistant to change ourselves, and we allow the big boss to win. But if we keep allowing that to happen, then nothing's going to change. We have to keep nagging them and saying what we believe is right over and over.
And you worry about fighting because, who wants conflict, who wants workplace problem, who wants to be seen as the nag or whatever, but you do have to fight. You do have to be relentless. But I think another important point is form alliances. Find other folks who are thinking along the lines you are and talk it up. And then, over pizza or something like that, just say, what the heck could we do? There must be something we could do, and who knows what. The folks who did the sit-ins, who just went into Woolworths or wherever and sat down at a counter, what the heck did they think they were going to accomplish? I have no idea.
Do something radical.
I mean, because anybody would have said to them, they are not going to serve blacks just because you came in here and sat down. They're going to hit you in the head. They went in there and sat down anyway. You got to fight. So.
This is our web and social media sideline reporter. What are you hearing?
Oh, I like that.
We have a question from Kate Ellington. She's asking that as the landscape is constantly evolving, constantly changing, how can we hold on to the progress, or do we just need to start new?
How can we hold on to the progress, or do we need to start from scratch? You got to hold on to the progress, definitely. But we have to have new ideas. We have to innovate, right? We have to continue to be creative. There's a whole generation of people in this room, much younger, right? College students, who are so used to technology that you don't even realize how much a part of your life it is. And technology is going to offer some solutions to some of these problems that we can't begin to tell you about up here. The Occupy movement is one example. The way that the logistics were coordinated through technology could never have happened like that 15 years ago.
Sir, you've waited very patiently for us.
Well, there are others who are.
Sure.
My name is Ray McPhee. I'm one of the others in the room who's quite fortunate in my marriage. This question is directed probably to you, Bob, because it's essentially political. And it's not really a question, it's a request for enlightenment. There seems to me to be a dark side of the American dream. And it's reflected in the nature of what's happening in our government, the zoo that we call the Congress. Because it seems to me that people in America believe in the American dream regardless. So when things are going to hell in a handbasket, they still vote the conservative agenda and all of that, which essentially is voting against their own interests. Talk to me about this.
I think that there is a dark side to the American experience, I think is maybe another way of putting it. What happens is we have lost sight of ordinary people in this country, ordinary working people, and what their lives are like what their needs are, and we have focused for the longest time on the elite, on the bankers, on the big-time politicians, on the billionaires and millionaires and that sort of thing, to the exclusion of everybody else. Now, many of the unscrupulous folks at the top, I mean, if you're talking about what's happening with government and politics and the influence of money and access as a result of money and all that sort of thing, what they've done is they have tried to pit all the other groups against themselves, the whole divide and conquer idea, and then they run off with the winnings. And I think that we did come to take the American dream for granted. We forgot a little bit about the hard work part. I don't think Americans are working, are lazy. I mean, they are very hard working, but I think that they lost a sense of how deep a struggle some of this stuff is, how long and how many sacrifices had to be made in the civil rights movement, in the women's movement, in the labor movement. And so they didn't realize that you had to make that kind of an effort, that it was more than just going to work every day and working at your job. And then just one final point is that when times get tough economically, then you start playing things a little closer to the vest. You know, it's easier to pass Medicare and Medicaid in the mid-1960s when jobs are plentiful and the economy is thriving and the middle class is expanding and all that sort of thing. But when people are losing their jobs and you have these huge government deficits and you don't know what's in store for your children, then you start getting this reaction, well, you know, we can't spend money on them, and why am I paying all these taxes for, you know, we're going to bail out these homeowners who did this, that, and the other thing, and we're irresponsible. So all of these issues are very, very, very complicated, and it is going to take decades, not just years, to resolve this stuff. If we're talking about employment, if we're talking about college access, if we're talking about reforming the political system and that sort of thing, you come back 15 years from now and we'll still be talking about it. What I hope is that we've made some incremental progress over those 15 years and then maybe 25 years and then maybe 30 years. But I'm talking about long haul. The crash in 1929, it took until after World War II for this economy to begin to right itself, and it probably really wasn't happening until sometime in the 1950s. Yeah.
Sir.
My name is Awatwolde Gabriel, and I'd like to apologize. My accent comes out more when I'm nervous, but I go to a wonderful liberal arts university, Oglethorpe University, and I came to the United States as a refugee of the 1990 war in Ethiopia. And the first time I heard about the American dream was in Ethiopia. It was because my father told me it is the country where you sleep with $1 and you wake up with $1 billion if you work so hard. And as a kid,
That's my dream.
I took it literally as a kid. I thought, you know, this country's crazy. Like, you wake up with, you know, I really took it as serious. And when I became a refugee and skipped out on many years of school, that shaped me to just have one goal in my life, which is just help people that are experiencing what I was experiencing, that were seeing what I was seeing as a refugee. And so when I'm in college, sometimes I think, like I said, I love my university and I love the faculty, and we have a wonderful university. And sometimes I think, is it worth taking a loan when I know I just want to help people? Is it worth, you know, learning about art when I just want to go and help a kid that's in a war country, you know? I don't know if a lot of people think this, but sometimes I just think, is all the effort that I know what I want to do, you know? I want to prevent kids from seeing what I've seen. So sometimes I don't know if you can tell me, sometimes do you have that thought? Is it really worth it to like invest so much, you know? And I mean, what keeps me around is, like I said, I love my university, and if I could be Mr. Oglethorpe, I would
you
do
obviously.
it.
What's your name again?
Awit.
Awit. You obviously already know the answer to your own question.
Yeah.
Because where are you? You're staying in school.
Yeah.
And because the best way you can achieve this is to get your degree. It's the #1 best way, and there's no, honestly, and I think a lot of you guys realize this now too, who are in college. One of the best places to start ideas and to get them turned into programs or initiatives is on the college campus. You have more resources available to you right now in your life than you will have when you graduate. And so you're in the perfect position. You're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Just be reassured.
And one more, Mr. Herbert, when I see you, I see what I want to be in the future. I really do. My father was a tailor. That's how he made his money. That is how he raised us, and it jumped to other businesses. But he had a 7th grade, 8th grade education, and he raised all of us, 12 siblings.
I'll just piggyback on what Debbie said.
I would love it if you could be my mentor. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but the school, I would love it if you would accept that.
Bob
I will
Herbert.
email you. I wrote it down.
Bob Herbert, 88.
I wrote it down. So
2 H's. Bob Herbert, 88@gmail.com.
He'll remember you.
But
Yes.
oh, I'll remember.
And I have a business card.
Okay.
I just want to piggyback on what Deb said. You already know the answer to whether it's worth it. That's why you're doing it. You asked specifically about going to art class or whatever the other class. It might be philosophy. It might be anything.
Forget philosophy.
If you want to help youngsters subsequently, the idea that you have a rich educational background and that you can talk to this girl about art. Maybe she's drawing pictures. Maybe she has some talent. But you can speak with a certain informed quality about art. Or you can speak with a certain informed quality about some aspect of philosophy or politics. Or, your dad was a tailor and you speak about your background and you put it in a historic context, for example. All those things are really important, but you can't do that if you don't have a rich educational background yourself. You won't be able to transmit what you're trying to transmit if you don't do the hard work that you need to do now. That investment is worth it.
Thank you so much.
Ma'am?
Hi, my name is Kelly Murray. I'm graduating in 2 weeks from Georgia State University.
Congratulations.
With both anthropology and journalism.
Look out.
Competition. I had an internship with a major news network last summer, and they had a meeting for all the interns, and they told us, they were talking about how to get future employment with this particular company, and they were telling me that my generation is perceived as being a generation that is obviously very good with technology and with computers. We grew up with that, and we also have a very high productivity rate. However, they also told us that we are perceived as a generation that has this strong sense of entitlement to everything. Mm-hmm. And I know you've touched on this a little bit with these speeches, but enlighten me a bit. I would like to overcome this kind of stereotype of my generation being entitled to things. I just don't see it that way with every single student that's coming out of college right now.
Why do you guys think that is, those of you who are millennials? Why do you think there's that perception that it's an entitled generation?
I'm starting to think it's the false optimism of the American dream, but I don't want to think that.
No, well, we want you to have the optimism. Do other people think? Raise your hand if you've heard that stereotype about.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's really interesting, right? There's Generation X. We have all these labels for our generations now. I don't know when that started happening. And
it started with the baby boomers. It all started with the baby boomers.
We're like bookends of the baby boomers.
We are. I was the first baby boomer. She was the last.
Let me go to the young lady here and then to our web
Can I just make?
correspondent.
But can I just give one
okay.
quick response though? What do you care? Can you imagine what kind of stereotypes I was dealing with as a black kid in the 1950s? You know, the hell with the stereotypes.
A friend of mine told me.
Do what you need to do.
That's a great answer. And just really short, a friend of mine told me yesterday a story about some kids who were complaining about how they were being perceived on the basketball field, and they were being stereotyped. And one of the girls in the car that they were driving said, just prove it on the field.
Right.
And that's all you got to do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Katie O'Dell, and I'm from Oglethorpe University. And I was wondering, how do we heal the American dream today? Everyone in this room, our American dream is revolved around consumption. And how do we heal that in this globalized world without disenfranchising the people in factories abroad to make what we want happen? So.
I don't think we have to worry too much.
I don't think of it that way. In the first place, we're not going to disenfranchise a lot of people working in factories abroad, because we're not going to bring a lot of that factory work back here to the United States. But you make a good point when you talk about the overemphasis on economics. And I really, one of the things I think is going to happen in this country is that we're already seeing many people experiencing lower standards of living. I think that that's going to increase as we go forward. And one of the things that I would like to see happen is that we pay closer attention and try to bring a little more fairness and equity to some of the lower standards of living, so that you don't have plunges for some people and other people continue to do really well. But I think that we need to make some cultural changes, and I don't know how to bring this about. I'm not an expert at this by any means, but I think that we need to view what is a successful life differently, and not just economically. And so when I was talking about the richness of experience that you get from going to college, it's not just about, is it worth this investment in terms of a payoff at a high-paying job down the line. I mean, if you get that high-paying job, swell. I'm not against that, but it's the richness of this one life that you get to lead, and how you use the richness of that life to somehow expand the existence of all the people who are close to you, your family, your friends, and that sort of thing. It is the thing that when Deb and I are at home is like the most important element in our lives. I mean, sort of what we have brought to each other and how we feel about it transcends anything in terms of economic well-being, as important as that is. I don't want to downplay it, but it's that real human existence that is the most important thing. And so I do think that we need to have much more of a cultural emphasis on what's human in our lives and how to enrich that humanity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Do you think some of this is based on where we live? Our friends at Opportunity Nation have a report out that shows great disparities based on state, county, and so forth, and they have a listing that you can pull up based on your state. So how much is this a national view, or is this, what's your view on?
I mean, I think it's national. I mean, obviously some areas have a great deal more opportunity than others. But access to education is a national problem. Employment is a national problem. The mortgage meltdown has been a national problem. So I think that and even to the extent that some areas are doing better than others, I think the solutions have to be national solutions. Yeah.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you especially to the young people for the quality of their comments and observations. Thank you to Stephanie and Arthur for making this evening possible. And thank you to Bob and Debbie for their thoughts.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Debbie.